Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Brothers and sisters, family in Christ, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. We're praising God that we're just keeping this ball rolling here. It's like a machine now. I've got such a wonderful staff working behind the scenes on Worldview Matters. And you guys, God bless you for sharing the podcast, because I think it was, what did we say recently? 80,000 downloads a month? Or was that a week? A week! 80,000 downloads a week. And that's audio. Anyway, praise God for you guys and just him using this to hopefully inform, challenge, equip the body of Christ, because we know that's lacking around the country in way too many churches. But anyway, going to talk about some things that I am really disappointed we have to keep hearing about, the injustices, and then we'll talk about technology and AI. But let's bring in our guest today, and you know where we're going. It's John Haller from Fellowship Bible Chapel in Ohio. You can look up him on YouTube and check his prophecy updates, Fellowship Bible Chapel on YouTube. And brother, thanks for your time today and appreciate all your research. Good to see you.
Good to be with you.
Before we got on, John, I was marveling at the fact that you got these 4 other guests who have been on our podcast and yourself in one place, and you just talked about tech and other issues, the Prophecy Roundtable on technocracy, transhumanism. Scott Townsend, Britt Gillette, Patrick Wood, Pete Garcia, and yourself. My goodness. And you did it just in around 2 hours.
Well, about 2 hours and 20 minutes. And we've actually been doing it with that group. Sometimes David Bowen joins if somebody's unavailable, or Tom Hughes.
Yeah.
So we have five to six people just sit around chatting about these issues and how they touch on Bible prophecy for 2.5 hours. It's an interesting format, and we've been doing it for over 2 years now.
Yeah. Explain, before we got on the podcast, you explained the green room idea that you came up with, because you speak at a lot of conferences, and how you decided to start doing this. I think that's actually very interesting, and I think it's very helpful to the body of Christ. Please explain that.
Yeah, so you go to a conference and everybody has their canned talks, and if you do conferences with the same guys as I do, maybe a couple times, 3 times a year, sometimes you've heard their talks, they've heard my talks, but the interesting talks, I think, are the ones that go on in the green room, where the speakers go between speaking and hanging out with people at their book tables if they have one. And it's a very interesting conversation. And so my goal in the roundtables that I've done, and I think other people, and I don't know if I'm the first one, but other people I see are doing a lot of roundtables now too, where they get 2, 3, 4, 5 people together to talk, because it's sort of, we have an outline, but it's really unscripted. And I think you get some insights that you might not get from somebody's talk that they give. So it was sort of, my goal was to take that green room experience and put it out there on YouTube or whatever for everybody to watch.
Okay, I think that's a great idea, and I think it's very helpful.
By the way, I think one of our first roundtables on technology, and I have a program called StreamYard that I use, and you can stream to multiple platforms. So it's on all my social media, and Britt Gillette streams it, and Patrick Wood and I think Scott stream it to their YouTube channels. But I think the first one we did got about 500,000 views total.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, that's a lot of people are getting the information then they're not getting elsewhere. So that's a good thing. So let's jump into this, John. We weren't going to start with this, but because of what happened during COVID and how I believe a lot of Americans are just irate with Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, his narcissism, his fame, how much money he made off of, I don't know, a lot of people died. So can we start with that and how frustrating it is for him to just plead the fifth and not have to answer any questions? Thanks to Rand Paul. Thank you, Josh Hawley, and those who drilled him and just gave some of the information that a lot of people had forgotten about. where do you want to start with this? Because you have background as a lawyer, and you've seen this. But for Americans that want justice, I don't think we're going to get it. Go ahead and share your thoughts.
So, yeah, I'm a lawyer, and I fully support things like the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which gives everybody, even if people don't like him, the right to not just incriminate yourself, the right to remain silent. And Fauci, so it's kind of it's a fairly complicated legal issue. Fauci was given a pardon, pretty broad pardon by Joe Biden or Joe Biden's auto pen. We're not sure about that. I don't know, by the way, I don't know if anybody challenged that in court, whether the court would come in and say that the pardon was invalid. But he got a pardon. And under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, the right you have to remain silent is if you have a reasonable fear of a prosecution. So the situation here is that Fauci cannot be prosecuted for any federal crimes because he has a pardon, and it's pretty broad. I looked up the terms of it. So the question is, then why does he get to invoke the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and not answer questions? So he shows up at the hearing, chaired by Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky the other day, and he has like 6 lawyers in tow. And one of them actually sits at the table with him where he's not supposed to be. And he takes the Fifth Amendment on every single question, I think 111 times or something. And so you went through and you could see the questions that people had. And I think you learn a lot about what happened during the COVID pandemic and Fauci's role, because the questioners had access to, and I don't know that they got this by hook or crook or anything like that. I think they probably subpoenaed his personal diary, and his personal diary is at very significant odds with what he said publicly during COVID and all of the lockdowns and that sort of thing. So he actually so what he was telling us was different than what he did in private. And RFK Jr., by the way, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, I think that's what he is, came out yesterday and said that actually after Fauci got his vaccine, he actually had a myocardial, and he had a heart attack, a myocardial infarction a month or so later, which was one of the side effects. So here's a guy who had the actual side effect, who was denying that any of these side effects were valid that people were having. So, and there were many other things in that diary that were at odds. I mean, there were, I think, some things early on where he said that something to the effect that it didn't really come from a wet market. It might have got a boost in the wet market, but it came from a lab. And so he clearly lied during that. Now, a couple things to say. So he has a right to invoke the Fifth Amendment. That's fine. He has the pardon. There are 2 things, though. One, when you invoke the right to remain silent, that means you need to shut up. You don't get to go into the Senate hearing and make this public statement that he read from, attacking Rand Paul and that type of thing for libeling or slandering him, and then wrap yourself in the Fifth Amendment after you've made a public statement. That's very inconsistent. So at some point in the hearing, the lawyer kept talking, and that's a big no-no. This is an official quasi-judicial proceeding where the witnesses are sworn to tell the truth. And the lawyers aren't allowed to coach their witnesses. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of depositions in my career as a lawyer and courtroom hearings and that type of thing. You don't get to coach your witness. That is verboten. And that's what the lawyer was doing. And so finally, Rand Paul just had the sergeant at arms at the hearing there, took the guy out of the room, to the applause of a whole bunch of people. I think I saw Laura Ingraham and some other people sitting in the gallery. And the guy, he said, go sit there where we told you to sit. You're not even sitting where he wouldn't. And amazingly, the lawyer didn't listen to him. So that's, but if you did that in a courtroom, that would be, you would be in contempt in about 20 seconds in almost every courtroom in America.
Yeah.
So
John,
he it was inconsistent that he pled the fifth, but he made a big public statement before. And this is still an issue, David. For example, in Ohio, we have Vivek Ramaswamy running as a Republican, and we have Amy Alcott running as a Democrat for governor election in November. And Amy she was the director of the Ohio Department of Health, who pushed everything that Fauci said on people in Ohio. And maybe one of the worst, because she was like at the leading cutting edge of this. And now she's running for governor. Like, well, I was this great protector of the health of Ohioans. So this is still a big issue all these years later.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of us have been affected by it. A lot of us, or our loved ones, were affected by it. And it really is astounding to me. And we'll see what happens. What do you see coming down the road, John? What's going to happen, if anything, to Dr. Fauci?
Well, by the way, so if you have immunity because of the pardon, you should be answering questions. However, he could make an argument that, well, I could be prosecuted by a very publicly conscious of the problems with how the COVID pandemic was handled and my role in that. I could be prosecuted in, say, Florida or Ohio or some other state. So because he's subject to being prosecuted under state law, Biden's pardon can only pardon him for federal violations. He could still be prosecuted. So he probably still could invoke the Fifth Amendment right. But again, it's entirely inconsistent that he made this rather large and aggressive public statement beforehand, but then he says, well, you can't question me about that. It's just, that's not the way it works. So if you let's just say, if you went into a court trial, a criminal trial, you're a defendant in a criminal case, you don't get up in front of the jury and get to make a statement and then say, when they want to call you to testify, that I have a right to remain silent. You do have a right to remain silent if you keep silent.
That's right.
But if you can't keep your big trap shut, then you don't have the right to say that with respect to the things that you've brought up in your public statement. That's pretty well settled law. Now, whether anyone will ever do anything about it, I don't know. I don't see the pardon being, I don't think the pardon is going to be challenged. I don't think the pardon is I think the pardon is going to stand. And the other question people ask, because I know my wife asks this, well, he was never charged with a crime. How can he be pardoned? But the pardon is sort of a prophylactic thing to protect you from being prosecuted, as well as if you have been prosecuted. So there doesn't have to be a prosecution before the pardon would be effective.
Well, most of us believe, in my opinion and opinion of a lot of people, that there's a lot of blood on his hands, and he's a criminal, but he sure did get rich off of COVID. But let's move on, John.
Well, by the way, he had 6 lawyers there yesterday. You don't do that unless you got some coin in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing too is any prosecution would take years, and he is 85 years old already.
Geez. All right, friends. Let's talk about some other things that are going on that we wanted to cover today. AI and warfare, drones. One thing you sent me, John, drones are coming and we're not ready. I don't think we're ready for a lot of things, but AI and the mark of the beast, this is very interesting that there is a connection, right? So where do you want to start with this? We're already zooming through here.
Yeah, so I think I would start with a statement that Patrick Wood, who I know you've had on your program and who was in our roundtable the other day, said a number of years ago. He said, we look at Bible prophecy and we get to Revelation chapter 13 and we read about this mark of the beast, that's going to be instituted by the false prophet and Antichrist. And Patrick made, I think this was one of the wisest things I've ever heard somebody say. Patrick said, look, when we get to that point in the end times where this is actually happening, it happens around the middle of the 70th week. The Antichrist and false prophet don't sit down and have a meeting and say, hey, we need to crowdfund and raise money to institute this mark of the beast. We need to develop the technology for that. It will be, and I think Dr. Naomi Wolf in some of her comments during the COVID pandemic, and she was talking about the Chinese social credit system and how it was being implemented. And it's implemented on steroids now. It's here. It's never going away until the Lord returns. We just need to learn how to fight aspects of it and to deal with it, because these people are not backing off. And Patrick's point was, they're not going to sit down and say, we need to develop something to control humanity and what they can buy and sell. The system will be there and they'll just flip the switch. And so I think we're at the point where this thing is being put together to just flip the switch.
So, yeah, I think a lot of us saw this coming, didn't know how it would play out or how we would get here. But with AI and with all the things we're seeing now, there are a lot of red flags. So talk about Sam Altman and what he's been saying recently, because I think there's some pretty provocative statements.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is when you look at and listen, whether we like Trump or not, we got to admit Trump is knee deep in this thing with the development of technology. He sees it as a way to economic prosperity. And it may very well be, but if you remember the scene at his inauguration, all of the tech bros, Zuckerberg, Musk, Jeff Bezos, the guy from Google, I mean, it was like $1 trillion of net worth sitting there in the front row at his inauguration. And starting with the day of his inauguration and continuing until just, recently, some things he put in place, executive orders on quantum computing. He's been very much behind this. Now, and he's also developed something called Pax Silica. And we know that there's this thing called Silicon Valley. They use silicon, and now that we have a Pax Silica program that he's put in place, he has a guy at the State Department who heads it up. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but he's married to a guy, and his wedding was performed by Sam Altman. Sam Altman and Elon Musk started a company called OpenAI, and it was supposed to be kind of open source and everything, but Elon left because Sam was turning it into a for-profit enterprise, which Elon said that's not why we were organized. So Sam took it that way, and Sam is very much into this. We're going to build this great system. Ray Kurzweil, you might remember the famous Time cover from back about 2011 that said 2045, the year man becomes immortal. And that's sort of the underlying religious Tower of Babel type thing that is behind a lot of this development of artificial intelligence. Ray Kurzweil, who was the focus of that Time article 15 years ago, he believed he would eventually become immortal. And so there's this thing that I think Kurzweil had been brought it up first, was the thing called the singularity, where technology just sort of takes over everything. And you can't stop it. You can't fight it. And it's for the greatness of humanity. And in an interview last week, as we're recording this, Sam Altman said, we have achieved the singularity. Now, we can argue whether that's hype because he's trying to prop up his company and all the money and everything. But he also said later in that interview that we have now developed technology to the point that it's like a genie. it will give you everything that you wish for. So there is this, as I said, this Tower of Babel type thing behind it. And these are their own words that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the money involved is incredible. So we talked about this in our roundtable about the data centers that are being built. We have massive data centers in all over Columbus, Ohio area. I'm sure, I don't know if they're up there where you are, but these things are huge. And the United States has about 5,700 data center complexes. 5,700. That's enough for 10 or more for no. Well, it's a lot. I mean, for every 50 states, it's like 100, and they're massive. So in the Wall Street Journal last week, to give you an example, they're talking about a data center between Columbus and Portsmouth, Ohio, in a town called Piketon. Piketon was the home of one of the largest, if not the largest, nuclear enrichment facilities to enrich uranium to be used in nuclear weapons. A huge, huge facility. They just came out, NVIDIA and other companies have said, NVIDIA said they would back it with OpenAI. And they're talking about building a data center that will cost $500 billion.
Jeez.
Now, you have to look at that. I saw a thing with like all these buildings being sold in Chicago, because the real estate values have dropped. But if you took these 22 buildings together, you wouldn't come up with $100 million, let alone $500 billion to build these buildings. And so the United States has more than every other country, I think all the other countries in the world combined, probably because we have these different AI companies competing. And you wonder, I think Patrick last night said in our roundtable was, data has no mass. You can put all the data in the world in a sugar cube and carry it around in your pocket. Why did they need these massive buildings? To give you an example, the Meta data center in New Albany, Ohio, it's actually across the street from a golf course. There used to be a golf course there that I used to play. It's 6 giant buildings. They're about 6 stories high. I don't know how wide they are, but they're as long as the Empire State Building is tall. 6 buildings like that in a field in New Albany, Ohio. Google, and I don't know how many billions they spent. Amazon and Google have each spent about $20 billion on construction costs, and they're just like giant hallways with racks of computer servers.
Jeez.
And it's a little bit daunting. And so they're taking all of this data, and now we have these things called flock cameras that are recording everything. And everything is like this. I was in Scotland a few years ago, and I was struck at the number of cameras were there, and there's speed control cameras way up in the highlands of Scotland everywhere you go. I went to a store. I went up to pay with a credit card, and it took my picture. Okay. And somebody had to come over and verify it was me and the credit card. Went out to the car, remembered, oh, wait, I stopped to get, how you are when you get older. I forgot to get the water bottles that I stopped to get. I went back in as I walked up to the terminal. So it's been, like 10 minutes since I was there. I walked up to the terminal, and before I did anything, my picture appeared on the screen at the terminal.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this stuff is digitized, facial recognition and that type of thing. And part of it is this giant control system. So we talk about digital currency, control grid, all of these things. And you wonder, like, where are our rights in this? So we talked about Fauci and his Fifth Amendment rights.
Yeah.
Where are our rights? There's
really?
There's a very famous video clip that I've used a lot. A lady named Pippa Malmgren, she and her family, she grew up in the finance business, and she was at what was then called the World Government Summit in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates 4 years ago, 2022. And she said, everything is moving to the blockchain. Everything is going to be digitized. Everything is going to be what they call tokenized. So every asset will be tokenized. Your property, your car, your everything you own is eventually going to be tokenized. Even public lands are being tokenized so that they're part of the blockchain. Now they say, well, it's for security. But Pippa Malmgren said, look, this is the way the world is going. This is the where finance is going. We're going to have a digital currency, but we also need a digital bill of rights. And so the question would be, like Sam Altman was asked about last week, what about the regulation? Mm-hmm. Alex Karp from Palantir was on Fox Business on July 28th, and he was asked questions about how do we regulate this? And he said, and this guy is in Palantir, defense, data gathering, and all of this sort of thing. And he said, we need regulation. But the question is, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
I don't trust China. I don't trust the UN. I don't even know if I trust other companies to do it, but somebody needs to regulate it. And when this AI started hitting 4 years ago, it really took off. And there were people saying, this is a existential civilization ending problem. We've watched Yuval Harari talked about this, about how who controls the data will be the person who controls the world.
Yeah. And
now we have these tech billionaires controlling the data, and it's stored in these massive data centers all over the world. We have 5,700 in the United States. China has between 400 and 700. But think about that. 5,700 data centers. I mean, they're building them in the desert. They're all over Ohio. And now they're talking about building one an hour south of Columbus that'll cost $500 billion. Wow. The numbers are staggering.
Yeah. And this is going to just get bigger and bigger. And it's just a matter of time before something's got to give. But regulation, that's a good question. And in that article, by the way, the Wall Street Journal, it says these data centers, the hubs involve power controlled by the U.S. government. And it depends on who's in charge, right? How that's going to go. But John, we've got to continue this conversation. We're going to do another podcast with you, and we'll have it on in another couple days. But thanks for your time. To be continued, brother.
Thank you.
Friends, God bless you. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter. See you next time.